there, it's Olivia-Savannah here from Olivia's Catastrophe, and today we're here to do a read it backwards of Percy Jackson and the Last Olympian. So before we get started, I need to tell you two things. The first one is that if you're wondering what on earth is this read it backwards thing that you're about to do, you need to go and watch a video that I'm going to link up there and down below, and it's going to explain everything to you easy peasy, and then you can come back here and watch this video. The second thing that I need to let you know is that this video is going to contain
spoilers.
So it's been literally years since I've read this series, and it's starting to show because I've already read the first 34 pages, which is like 3 chapters, and I am confusion. First of all, there was the iconic first line, and I love when the first line just grips you so instantly. A Pegasus landing on their car, yes please, more. And then it mentions that like this person is worth like something gold drachmas, and I was like, oh my goodness, that money, that currency, I haven't heard of it for ages. It just threw me right back into nostalgia mode, which was really nice. The scene opens with Percy and this girl called Rachel in a car, and I was like, who is this person called Rachel? I don't remember Rachel in the slightest, but there's references to Rachel having been in past books. I'm like, who is this chick? Why does it seem like Percy and Rachel are on a date? Where is Annabeth? That is all I care about. I'm so confused about who this person is. Also, it throws a lot of imagery at me that I don't know. Like, it talked about Apollo's sacred cow, and I was just like, they were like something something compared to Apollo's sacred cow, and I was like, I have no idea what you're referencing. I probably would if I'd be reading this series in order, but I don't. I'm just so lost. I'm so lost. I can see that Rick Riordan is trying to be kind, because throughout the first couple chapters he keeps referencing things that have happened in past books, but he references them in 1 or 2 sentences that is likely to niggle someone's memory if they've read the series, I don't know, a month or 2 ago. However, it's been about, I don't know, a little bit less than a decade since I've read the first 4 books, so it's not niggling any memories for me whatsoever. I'm just confused. I'm seeing all these references and I'm like, I should get this, but I don't get this. Okay, so what I do understand is that there's a war coming and there's a prophecy involved, and spoiler alert, but you've already had your spoiler alert. I remember that everybody thinks that the prophecy is about Percy, but the prophecy is actually about Luke. That's the main thing I remember taking away from this, because it blew my teenage mind. I was like, oh my goodness, that is the best plot twist ever, and I still think it's the best plot twist that I've seen on a prophecy in a book before, and I'm looking forward to seeing that. Although I don't know what this prophecy contains anymore. I just want you to know that page 9 of this book is the first time I laughed. It was a joke that has to do with uglyface.com. What is it about middle grade fantasy books that are just hilarious? Artemis Fowl, Percy Jackson, they never fail to make me laugh. I've actually laughed multiple times since then, and probably will continue to all the way through this book. Also, when Percy pulled out a pen and then it turned into Riptide, I smiled so much. Again, the nostalgia feelings are coming back. I'm slowly starting to understand things as things go along, so I understand Kronos is evil. I'm not gonna forget that. However, Luke is Kronos. I didn't know that, so that was a shock. So when I read this when I was younger, I remember being quite impressed by all of the action scenes in this one, and as far as my memory serves me, this is a very action heavy book. However, now I'm not that sold on the action, having just come from the Artemis Fowl series where I think the action is done much better and in more depth and less rushed and just feels more real. I feel like the action in this one is kind of on the lacking side, and I'm just not really convinced by a lot of it. So that's a bit of a disappointment, especially as I know that this is going to be the most action heavy book in the whole series. So that's something new that I wouldn't have thought when I first read it, I don't think. Also, someone's dead within the first chapter. Okay, I knew that this person was going to die because Percy was like, we're going to make it back to camp. And then I was like, yo, that guy's not going to make it back to camp. But I do appreciate seeing a character die in the first book, because it just sets such high stakes for the rest of the book. You know that characters can die easily, even if maybe we care about this Beckendorf guy from previous books. I don't, because I have no memory of who this person is, but maybe we're supposed to care, and he's dead, so that's going to be an intense journey throughout the rest of the book. The theme of there are no winners in war is coming through, and I just love this theme so much. I've read it in so many fantasy books. I will never get tired of it, because we still have wars going on and people don't seem to understand that winning a war is not the biggest thing in the world. And last but not least, the main thing that I have to take away from reading those first 3 chapters is Percy doesn't know what the prophecy is. I'm sorry, I thought we already would have known what the prophecy is by the 5th book in the series, because as far as my brain remembering me, we meet the oracle in the 1st book and she's like, I got a prophecy. So does the prophecy exist for like 4 books but Percy doesn't know what it is? How did we survive that kind of suspense? I'm confused. But the good thing about reading it backwards is that it doesn't matter about the fact that there's been 4 books where we don't know the prophecy. I'm going to get to know it in the next chapter and it's going to be instant. So that's gratifying. I'm going to keep reading and I'll get back to you with my next update soon. Okay, so I have read a quarter of the way through The Last Olympian, so I'm here to talk to you about what I thought. I do want to say excuse if it sounds like I'm slurring words or if my voice is just a little bit off. I've got a really bad habit at the moment of, in my sleep, chewing my tongue, so there's quite a lot of cuts and it's quite painful to speak, but I do need to get this video done, so that's why I might sound a bit off or weird in these clips. The first thing I wanted to say is that we get back to Camp Half-Blood and it just threw me right back to my childhood. I was feeling so nostalgic. We got to see Chiron, I believe that's how you say it, and also Annabeth was there and I was like, yes, Annabeth is there! And Annabeth calls Percy Seaweed Brain and I legit wanted to cry because my childhood was phoning me up like, hey, we're back in business. I also found it quite funny that the prophecy that Percy has been not told about all his life was actually there in the necklace, in the oracle. That was just entertaining. I love when things are in plain sight and the people are like, what? It was there all along. Also very entertaining when Percy is reading out the oracle and he's getting words wrong because of the fact that he's dyslexic. I always remember this series as one that actually had dyslexic rep in there and it just comes in every now and again and isn't kind of glossed over and just never brought back to the surface. When the prophecy was read out, it was like one of the old gods' children and I was like, so the prophecy can't be about Luke, because I'm guessing the old gods is the like trio, so it can only be about Thalia, Percy or Nico, but then Nico is in the later books, that, you know, the spin-off series, so Nico can't be dead. And then Thalia, I don't think it's her. Like, was it her? I don't think it was her. And if it's not Percy, I thought it was Luke. I was so sure that the prophecy was low-key about Luke, but you know what? Maybe I just have to read the book to find out, but I just remember the prophecy is not actually about Percy, which is still a brilliant plot twist. I just can't remember who it's actually about anymore. I was also wondering where Grover was. We got to the part where it mentions that Grover has been missing for the past 2 months, and I was like, yeah, I was thinking about that. I was wondering, where is Grover? Because Grover used to be so good friends with them all, and I didn't even know that the god Pan was supposed to be dead. I know that they meet Pan at some point. I remember that they had that meeting, but the fact that he's dead, I mean, it just makes sense because I know that these are set in our modern world but kind of a spin-off, so the fact that the god of nature is dead, yeah, that sounds about right and accurate for what we've been doing to the world. They're talking about O'Leary, which is this giant hellhound pet, and I have no memory of this pet whatsoever. Like, when she came in, and she's been actually like a part of the story up until now, I'm like, what? I have no memory of you. This is just funny what I do remember and what I don't remember about this series. Also, can we have a moment to talk about the fact that Nico's powers are the coolest? I want to be a daughter of Hades. I want to travel through the shadows and bring skeletal mice to life and talk to ghosts. I want to do that. I already know that I'm a child of Athena, okay? I am a daughter of Athena. But can I please be a daughter of Athena while also being a daughter of Hades? That made me so happy. I could just wear black all day like I usually do anyway and have such cool powers. Percy's gone to see Luke's mum and then he goes and visits his own mum, and whoever his mum is with, Paul, this guy Paul seems really nice, so I'm guessing that Paul is not the person that Sally is with in the first book, because the person I remember Sally being with in the beginning, who I always picture like Sally's with someone, I picture this horrible guy from book 1, and yeah, he's horrible, so I guess it's not Paul, seeing as Paul seems to be like the complete opposite. He seems to be lovely. Also, I'm getting a bit frustrated because I'm quite an impatient reader sometimes, and this whole time it's all like, Nico's plan is dangerous, Nico's plan is that, and I'm like, I just want to know what Nico's plan is. I feel like when other people know something and I don't know as a reader, I get very impatient and frustrated to know what it is, which does prompt me to read faster, so it works. It makes your book addictive. But I'm just realizing, if for all 4 of these previous books we didn't know the prophecy, and I was reading it as a reader now, I would sincerely struggle with that fact that you have to wait 5 books to know what the prophecy is. However, we don't have to worry about that because we're reading it backwards. Okay, so I'm currently halfway through Percy Jackson, so let's continue talking about this 5th book. So we found out the reason why Grover was missing and what's happening to him, and I have to admit, the reasoning was kind of pathetic. I expected there to be a bit more to that storyline, but that wasn't the case. He was just sleeping because Morpheus made him sleep. And I know it's supposed to be foreshadowing for something that's going to go down later because I've already reached that point, but it was just a bit of a like, that was the reason, 2 whole months. They could have had some more suspense with that. That said, I did really like Morpheus's power to be able to put people to sleep. If you can't tell, I'm kind of in awe of the world building in the series. I always have been, and I just like what it does with the Greek mythology and the like abilities that it gives people depending on whichever Greek god they are or whichever demigod they are. I always really like seeing those little tidbits of the world building. Then we have Nico and Percy going down to the underworld, and we get to see Hades and Persephone and Demeter like discussing and having a bit of a banter with each other, and I quite liked seeing that. I think I remember that scene distinctly just because back in the day when I was younger, I was all about the Hades and Persephone story. I found it absolutely fascinating. So getting to see them in the book when I was younger must have really, you know, probably prompted me on that journey, because I do think Percy Jackson was what made me so interested in Greek mythology when I was younger, and then I went on to read all this non-fiction about it and everything. So probably the depiction of Hades and Persephone in this book, maybe even that very conversation, sparked my love for that Greek mythology story. With great power comes the great need to take a nap. We just love Rick Riordan's humorous lines. They're absolutely brilliant. Also, now that I've read further, I can just see that Miss O'Leary, the hellhound dog, is a huge part to this story and this series, and I'm just wondering how I managed to forget her character entirely. Like, there's no memory of her in my brain, and that scares me because she seems so integral to the story. There was one point where Percy was feeding Nico ambrosia, which is the first mention of ambrosia we've had in this book, and basically the first mention of it since my reread. And I remember just thinking, oh, I would love to taste that. You know, when people make things out of books, I'd be interested to try ambrosia. I'd be so curious. Also, somebody tell me why Athena is literally the only smart god of them all. Like, Athena's like, it's a trap, let's send some people back to Olympus, and Zeus, oh my gosh, Zeus is like, nope, we're not gonna do that, you have to stay here, which is annoying because Athena always knows her stuff. And if you're keeping Athena next to you because she's the goddess of strategy and all that jazz, then listen to her when she's talking about strategy on a larger scale. She knows what she's doing. Makes me so frustrated, and also kind of makes me proud to be a daughter of Athena. Like, I know I was just talking about Hades being all great and everything, but you know, stan Athena sometimes when she's not being mean. Also, I kind of hate when a big battle or like the big conclusion to a series depends on knowing the villain's past. Like, I understand why that's such a plot trope that's done quite often. It's all about know your villain, and once you truly know your villain, you will sympathize with them, but you'll also know the way in which you can beat them. I get that, I understand that, but it's just annoying when you're like gearing up to something suspensefully and you're like all moving towards action and fights and this big moment where the person's going to be able to conquer the enemy, and yet it's just broken up with having to go back to these flashbacks of not that interesting stuff so you get to know the villain's personality, especially when this is done across the series. So I'm not talking just about Percy Jackson here, but there's other series which have like 7 books in them or 6 books in them, and all through those 6 books you could have given us small flashbacks which builds up the villain all through the series, so that when we get to the final action bit, we are not disturbing and disrupting that action by breaking it up with flashbacks, because those flashbacks will have had happened before. But if you save all those flashbacks for the last book, it means that when we're ready for that action, when we're ready for that suspense, it keeps getting killed off by needing to go back into the past, and it frustrates me a bit. It's not Percy Jackson and the Last Olympian's fault, but this is something that frustrates me a lot about a lot of the book series I read, and that's why finales to book series tend not to be my favourite, because lots of them rely on this, especially if they're fantasy and they have a villain. Rant over. There's also a little line in this because part of the trap is that Morpheus has set all of Manhattan into a big sleep. And there was this small line which mentioned that lots of the drivers, when they realized that they were going to pass out into a deep sleep, tried to pull over. And I don't know, that just made me so happy that law-abiding citizens, or just citizens that are trying to do the right thing. Okay, so they're about to start fighting these monsters in Manhattan while everything's asleep, and then Thalia shows up and she brings with her the Artemis hunters. So Thalia is alive. That was something I didn't remember. Was she still alive? Was she still there? I was like, why is she mentioned but not in Camp Half-Blood? And now I remember. I think there was a point in a book, like towards the end of a book, where she had a choice whether she could stay in Camp Half-Blood or she could join the Hunters, and she wasn't feeling like she fit into Camp Half-Blood or something like that, and then she chose the Hunters. Vague memories. Again, don't quote me on this. Could be wrong. We'll find out when I reread the rest of the series backwards. But it's nice to see her here, which also means the prophecy could be about her, but I don't really remember and I'm not entirely sure, so don't, quote me on this. I was so sure that the prophecy was about Luke, and now I'm just doubting everything. But I'm thinking that the prophecy is either going to be about Luke or it's going to be about Thalia. Probably Thalia, because she's one of the old god's daughters, but I don't know. I don't know, and I want to know, which means I should read the book. I just want to be right, but I can't even, give you an option or an answer. In the midst of a battle, Percy's asking all the right questions, like why do Pegasi gallop as they fly away? And I don't know, it just got me for a second. Like, that was a really good question. It was nice seeing the Minotaur for a moment come back in this last book. I love when you get full circles like that in the final books of series. And I even remember the scene in the first book where Percy's trying to get to Camp Half-Blood. I mean, the mother is trying to bring Percy there, and the Minotaur like slays her right in front of Camp Half-Blood. And I think she dies and then comes back to life because of something Hades, something. But we'll see. We get a flashback where we get to see what happened with Hades and Nico's mother and all of that jazz, and it was just so sweet to see Hades like caring about his children and wanting to protect them and wanting to protect this lady that he's in love with, and I don't know, that was so heartwarming. Even though he's horrible to Nico now, it got me. I'm such a fan of Hades. I bet the Hercules film has something to do with this, but that aside, I'm actually really liking Hades in this series. I also had a moment where I literally just realised, I don't know what made me clock this. I think it was something in the prophecy about how Hades was like, I don't want my children to turn 16 because then they could be the ones for the prophecy. I was like, hang on, hold up a second. They're all 15, like Athena and Percy, not Athena, Athena's not 15, Annabeth and Percy are supposed to be 15. I don't know what it is about young adult, but when I read it, I actually can rarely ever read the characters as the age that they are at. I guess this is a middle grade series, but for now it feels young adult because now they are 15, and I'm just like, 15! They're doing all of these cool things, and I know that the demigods have to grow up faster and things like that, but still, I'm just like, 15. That's 2 years younger. Like, what is it? Jacob from the Twilight Saga is 16. They're almost the same age. Well, I guess they're doing round about the same stuff. And then last but not least, Percy keeps having these dreams about this Rachel chick, and I'm like, who are you? Why are you here? Why are you threatening the Perkabeth ship? Why? I know that, Perkabeth is endgame. I specifically remember the fact that I had to wait the entire series for an underwater kiss, which is literally the final scene. I can remember that much. But Rachel being here and just threatening it just doesn't sit well with me. I'm like, get out of Percy's mind. Also, is she a new oracle or something? Why does she have these like prophetic dreams and all of that jazz? I'm curious. I feel like she's another oracle, but that can't be because we just saw the oracle get cursed by Hades in a flashback. Anyway, I'm a little bit over halfway and I will keep reading today. I think hopefully I can just read a lot of this because this video is supposed to go out soon. So I've got 60 pages left to go, and I just thought I would give you an update of my thoughts in the last 100 pages before I go and finish off this book. So what I wanted to say is that one thing I'm noticing a lot that this book does is really show a variety of relationships with parents. So because of the Greek gods and how they manage being parents, you get children who are unclaimed, children who are completely abandoned by their godly parent, and then you've got the godly parents who try and get a bit involved, who show that they love them even though they're absent, and then you've got those parents who are very fickle, like fading in and out of their lives. And you know, with Percy in particular, we get to see when he has a horrible stepdad in the beginning, I think, and you get to see that side of things, but then you get to see this lovely stepdad in this book later on, and you see Sally, who loves Percy all the way through this series and does her best for him. So you get to see all these complicated relationships with parents, and it's just so interesting and so wide in the portrayal of parent-child relationships in this book, and I quite admire that. You get to see a lot of, you know, different representation which can reach out to different teenagers and whatever parental spirits that they're having. And that said, I guess Camp Half-Blood is quite found family. I mean, they date within there, so it's not entirely found family, but then you've got your cabins, and I feel like the book doesn't lean into that found family aspect that much, but we're seeing it a bit more in this one with how Luke and Thalia and Annabeth were in the past. I do want to say that I'm getting a bit bored with this book. Mostly I'm reading most of this in one day, and I think that's emphasizing the fact that I can see this pattern of battle flashback, battle flashback, battle flashback, and even within the battles there's like a grand battle that happens and then everything looks like they're gonna lose and it's a dire matter, and then in comes this group of support that they didn't expect, and then they kind of win that little battle, and then the next battle happens and it looks like they're losing, and this group comes in that they didn't expect to support them, and that just is a rinse repeat in this book. So I'm getting quite bored. We also have a moment where Percy realizes that yes, Cronus is evil, but the Olympians are not that great either, and they definitely have flaws. I have mentioned how I like there's no winners in war, but also how there's no good side in war, and we get to see that here. Of course, we're rooting for the Olympians, but we do know the Olympians need to shape up. And while I was seeing that, I think I have this memory that at the end of this book, because Percy's been so great, he gets to be offered a chance to become immortal, to become like an immortal demigod, aka kind of a Greek god, and he turns down that offer, but his consequence is that there should be no more unclaimed children in Camp Half-Blood. I think they say all parents must claim all of their children, and also that there needs to be cabins for each and every god, even the lesser gods, because the lesser gods are really turning against the Olympians because they don't get that acknowledgement. So I think that's why in the sequel series Camp Half-Blood has been expanded and you get children like demigods from different gods that we don't see in this series. However, I don't know if that's truly the ending. This is just my memory kicking in by reading this book, so I guess we'll see, you know, in the next video clip of me whether I'm right or wrong. But I also think I can't like say for sure that that's what happens in the sequel series because I've never read the sequel series. This is again me just going based off of things that I've heard and seen within the Percy Jackson fandom. Also, just take a moment to imagine if Percy accepted that offer and Percy was a god. It would be such a funny time. At one point in this book, Percy's like, yeah, Thalia looks so young now that she stopped aging, and I was like, stopped aging? So I was trying to remember why Thalia had to join the Artemis Hunters, and now I'm thinking that maybe she was turned from a tree into a human again, because I know that she used to be a tree, and I know that the golden fleece being put on the tree brought her out of the tree. I'm pretty sure that's my memory. Again, I'll find out when I read backwards. But maybe if she came out of the tree, because she was young when she went in, she started to age, and therefore the only alternative to save her life was for her to not be in Camp Half-Blood and join the Hunters. Let's see if I'm right. Future read it backwards, Olivia. See if you got this correct. Future read it backwards. I'm essentially doing Back to the Future here. Oh no. Rachel, I really think she's like another Oracle or something. She's literally just dumped Percy, and I feel like that whole thing just went very quickly. It was very quickly decided. She looked into a fire and she's like, right, I'm not supposed to be with Percy. Percy knows I'm not supposed to be with him. This was all just a distraction, which she's correct about because Annabeth is the one. But I feel like they kind of pushed aside that whole thing pretty fast. We also discovered in this one that Selena was the spy. I haven't mentioned that there was a spy storyline running all the way through this just because I didn't particularly care. Like I knew, like I feel like if I was a younger reader I'd be like, oh my gosh, there's a spy, who could this spy be? Let me guess who this spy is going to be. But I felt like with the spy storyline they always expose who the spy is at the end, and you just have to wait and they'll tell you. Like it doesn't there's nothing that they can do to combat the spy, and Percy was making this a really boring storyline. He was like, we're not even going to try and find out who is the spy and do all this like second guessing of everyone. We can't defeat the spy, we just have to focus on the battle. So if Percy made a bigger deal out of the spy and was like, we need to try and understand the spy, and it kind of made a split in their defenses, it would have made the whole storyline about the spy more interesting, more investing, and I would have cared about trying to figure it out because the main character is trying to figure it out. Instead, Percy was like, let's not figure it out, time's gonna tell us, or even if not, we've got bigger problems. So I was like, sure, we've got bigger problems. I don't care about the spy storyline. If you're an author, you've got to make the characters care about interesting storylines, otherwise the readers won't either. So that's my critique on that storyline. But we found out that Selena was the spy, which I don't think makes a lot of sense, because she said in the beginning Luke was really nice, and she did it because Luke said that Charles Beckendorf was going to be safe. That said, Beckendorf died at the beginning of the book, and throughout this whole book, the spy is still feeding information to Kronos. So my question is, why would Selena continue to feed information to Kronos when Beckendorf is dead and the promise has been broken until this point? Like, I don't understand. I'm going to talk about the mythology behind Achilles here, so if you don't want to have any spoilers for The Silence of the Girls or Song of Achilles, and you don't know Greek mythology either, because those stories are automatically spoiled for you if you know Greek mythology. I already knew who this was going to end because I knew Greek mythology. But if you don't want spoilers for those and you don't know Greek mythology, feel free to skip until when I jump into my next setting to talk about this book, which will probably be upstairs. But I'll see you then. I'll see you in a couple of minutes. But if you're still here, you know about the endings of those books, or you know the mythology around Achilles, then I just want to say the whole scene with Clarisse and Selena, that was Achilles, because Achilles' best friend is Patroclus. Patroclus dies, and then Achilles takes the person who kills the person who killed Patroclus, which is, you know, what's his name, Hector, and then in his chariot he drives around with Hector's body dragging behind, and he's like demanding that the person who killed Patroclus come and fight him. That is essentially this scene remade in this book, and it made me so happy because Clarisse kills the Drakon, which has killed Selena, and then she attaches the Drakon to her flying chariot and drags it around the battlefield, demanding Kronos come out to fight her. And I saw that echo, which just echoes the Greek mythology, and it makes me happy. It makes me happy to see those echoes, because while this whole series is about Greek mythology and the world building is all based on Greek mythology, it's also nice when those tidbits are kind of scattered in there more discreetly for the big mythology fans who know about all the mythology can find them, rather than the ones where they tell you the myths and then it feeds into their adventure. I like both, but it was just nice to see. I finished reading Percy Jackson and the Last Olympian, and what I want to know is, why am I so emotional? But let's get into my thoughts that I made as I was reading. Prophecy was about Luke. Why did I even doubt my memory? Because I remember that was the biggest plot twist of my childhood that I really remember absolutely blowing my mind. So of course, when I originally thought, oh, it's Luke, it was Luke. I don't know why when it said like a demigod of the old gods, I thought it could only mean Poseidon or Hades and it couldn't be anybody else, but I don't know why I doubted that it was Luke. It was Luke. Also, Percy said I chose this weak spot on my back because it's somewhere less embarrassing than, I don't know, say my armpit or anything, and then Luke's weak spot ended up being his armpit. We see you foreshadowing, we see you foreshadowing. Well, there were many things that I was right about that my memory just served me well on. For example, the fact that the gods were like, we can make you immortal, and the fact that Percy was like, no thanks, we just want recognition for all the demigods. So I liked that aspect of it, and it was nice to know that I could remember those important things. I was also correct in thinking that Rachel was going to be the next Oracle. It wasn't something that I remembered from reading this in the past because, as I said in the beginning of this video, I had no memory of Rachel. But it was something that you could just pick up on with the hints, and that makes a lot of sense. I was feeling so emotional at the end of this book, unreasonably emotional for the fact that I just reread this last one. I felt the kind of emotion I feel after I've reread an entire series from beginning to end all the way through, as if you've just gone on that intense journey. The fact that I could reread only one book in this series and it be the last book in this series without, you know, full memory of what happens in books 1, 2, 3 or 4, and still feel that nostalgia, bittersweet emotion to the point where I just wanted to, like, I don't even know, that goes to show that it's a very powerful series, and also that it was so integral to my childhood, because yeah, it just sparked my whole interest in Greek mythology, and I did lots of research after reading this series, and it's just really, really memorable. I remember reading this in a holiday to Zwolle, which is this place in the Netherlands, and reading this book and having my mind blown, and then reading The Host by Stephanie Meyer and having my mind blown, and then not being able to read anything on holiday because my mind was blown into smithereens. That said, I just really had so much fun reading this. I really enjoyed it. I don't think I'd rate it 5 stars. If younger me read this, she would have rated this 5 stars. I feel like now I would rate it 4, 3. I think I would give this one 3, which is really, really harsh. But if I was going based on nostalgia as well, I would give it 4 stars. But if I was trying to be critical, I'd probably give it 3 stars. I'm looking forward to rereading the rest of the series, because this used to be one of my favourites, and the fact that I wouldn't call this my favourite in the series anymore makes me wonder, do I have a favourite in the series anymore? It's going to be an interesting journey, and hopefully some of the things that they reference in the previous books that I was like, what on earth are they referencing? I'll be able to understand and know what they're talking about. So that is that. Thank you so much for joining me on my Read It Backwards for Percy Jackson The Last Olympian. I forgot what the 4th one's called, but that's what's coming next. So stay tuned for that. Let me know in the comment section down below any thoughts you've had while watching this video. Please give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Hit that subscribe button if you want to see more. And don't forget to hit that notification bell so you can be updated every time I have a new video. And you know what they say, onwards and upwards. Excelsior!